podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. Chris Stemp here. Thanks for tuning in. On this show, numerous times we have covered things like nutrition, what to eat, gut health, etc. But there's always a spin, there's always a hook, there's always something interesting about it. And this week is no exception. For example, did you know that blueberries can help you cope with the after effects of trauma? Did you know that salami can cause depression, or that boosting vitamin D intake can help treat anxiety? Yeah, neither did I. This week's episode is less about a dogma, a diet, a fad, and more about the specific impacts that various foods can have on our everyday experiences. And there is no better person to explain this to us than our guest, Uma Naidu. Uma is a Harvard psychiatrist and author of the brand new book, This Is Your Brain on Food, an indispensable guide to the surprising foods that fight depression, PTSD, anxiety, OCD, and more. You see, Uma has devoted her career to the science of food and its link to mental health. Dr. Uma is the founder and director of the Nutritional and Metabolic Psychiatry Department at Mass General Hospital in Boston, where she actually consults on nutritional intervention for the psychiatrically and medically ill. So essentially, think about a doctor prescribing food. I find it fascinating. I hope you do too. And don't forget, we're back to weekly episodes. As you've noticed, we are trying this out, seeing how it works. So don't miss an episode. Make sure you've clicked that follow button in whatever podcast app you are listening to. With that, going to turn it over to my interview with Uma Naidu as we talk about her brand new book, This Is Your Brain on Food. Enjoy. Nutritional psychiatry. I didn't even know that was a thing. I know about how food impacts the body and how they're neurotransmitters and they're more in the gut. And there's all this stuff out there. Most people listening know that. But you're telling me there's an actual field that talks about specifically how food affects your brain and your mental health as much as a drug we might put in to do the same thing.
Absolutely. It's a very nascent field. That's why people are starting to hear about it. It also really emerged around the burgeoning evidence connecting the gut and brain, and really our understanding of the gut microbiome. So I'm not surprised if people haven't heard about it. And there are very few people practicing. Part of what my book is doing, and I'm hoping will continue to do, is bring this field forward because people are looking for more tools in the toolkit. I still prescribe medications, but I know that they're limiting, and I know that clinically, while I also know they've saved the lives of some of my patients. So it's sort of being able to have a number of options for people. And yes, the way that we eat is very powerful. We have a lot of autonomy. We have a lot of power right at the end of our fork. And those decisions, since we eat several meals a day, and eating is one of our primary activities, it's an easy solution to try to tweak in order to feel emotionally better.
Yeah. Food is so complex, and there's so much competing information, as I was alluding to. How much do we actually know about it? How confident can we be in the science as it currently stands? Or do you imagine, look, this is the best we can do now, but it's probably going to be entirely different 20 years from now?
So that's an interesting question, Chris, because I think there are two separate sort of answers. And let me explain it this way, in the way that I see it. I think there's the culture of diet wars and sort of food dilemmas that people face every single day. I see it in my practice. Should I eat this? What should I exclude? Should I do that? Should I count calories? Should I, count carbs? What should I do? But separate to that, there are also some basic principles. Now, nutritional psychiatry is really the use of healthy whole foods and nutrients based on the scientific evidence. Scientific evidence may evolve and change, but I don't think that we're going to get away from some really important principles like a plant-rich diet, healthy, clean sources of protein, use of healthy fats, being aware of where you're getting your fiber from. All of those things are really rooted in some basic healthy eating principles, but they also have an impact on mental health based on either nutrient or based on the fiber or based on the vitamin involved. What's sustainable about nutritional psychiatry is that there are going to be these principles that are going to help your mental health. Does it mean that in a year from now or 2 years, we won't hear something exciting about the microbiome that could change or tweak something? Absolutely. But things in medical science change all the time. That's how we keep current. But I don't think it's going to be so drastic that in 10 years from now, someone is going to say, Chris, you should eat every single packaged, processed, ultra-processed food, and you shouldn't really care where your food comes from because, it's all good. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's where I get so frustrated because hopefully we're going to have a guy on the show, and he is this big promoter of what's called the Carnivore Diet, which I'm sure you've heard of. But that's one example of something that is so counter to what I know about it. In fact, they go so far as many of these doctors, I'm sure you've heard of them, talking about how plants are actually bad for us because they have protective mechanisms that impede our digestion and actually cause havoc in the body. Then there's keto, which is all of a sudden now eat a ton of fat and don't, and then there was Atkins. And it's like at each stage, there are seemingly intelligent people saying these things. And that's why I think it gets so tough. I'm interested in your take on, because you were just saying, right, we're not going to get to eat processed food, but there are people, seemingly intelligent people, putting things out like just eat meat or just eat fat. And that seems crazy.
Right. This is one of the reasons as I, really built out my research and did work in this field and continue to, I hope, bring it forward in a good way. I consider myself diet agnostic. So if someone who is on a carnivore diet came to see me and was worried about their mental health, I'm going to share my opinion of how can we bring some balance to this diet. Same thing with someone who's vegan. You may be missing some nutrients. We don't have to guess. We can check things and we can assess if you need to up certain nutrients in a plant-based way that you're comfortable with. So I think it's about finding the solution really for that person's mental well-being. I think when we get into these diet wars, and you're right, there are people will quote scientific literature and how this statistic means that, you should only consume this type of food and not that. Just like the carnivore diet, there are other practitioners who believe that a plant-based diet is the only way to go. And, for the sake of transparency, I was raised vegetarian culturally. Happen to be born into a vegetarian family. That's why I'm vegetarian. And I don't necessarily have a political or other belief around whether you should eat meat or not. I just happen to be, and as a chef, I cook anything. So I feel like for myself, I try to do is bring a sense of balance to what I do, but also bring a sense of balance to the opinion. So if you walked into my office and said, well, I'm trying to struggle between this and that, I'm actually going to talk to you about what you're eating, what the nutrients are, break down and unpack what nutrients are sort of negatively affecting your mental health. And what are the things you can do to tweak to actually address that symptom or address how you're feeling emotionally? Because if not, people are just walking around confused. One day it's eat all the fat you can, another day it's like everything should be low fat. Then, on a different day it's exclude this entire, this entire group of foods because they're plants or whatever it is. So it's just, it gets to be very hard for people to interpret information, and that's one of the reasons why I think we struggle so much.
Let's say you're comparing food to pills. Okay, we're comparing food to pills. So we're comparing our diet to, Ritalin and some SSRIs and all the other things, right? ADD medication and anxiety medication. What is the equivalent? And what I mean by that is like how much impact you think you can have with both?
As I said, I do still prescribe medications, but I also feel like there are limited in their effectivity. They can be life-saving, and in certain instances, Chris, if someone has a severe depression, has lost touch with reality, is manic, or so severely depressed that they're suicidal, medications are a very important role as well as other forms of treatment, but they need to be seeing a doctor. However, studies have shown, for example, in studies of anxiety, that about 50% of people don't necessarily recover from all of their symptoms. And this is even including with forms of therapy. So I think there's ongoing research that suggests to us we need a more holistic and integrated model of care, which is what I speak about nutritional psychiatry, meaning that it's not, it's not just taking out that prescription pad. It's what else do you need to be doing, and this is where diet forms a very powerful role, because a lot of those individuals have maybe eating a poor diet, may have, especially during the pandemic, started leaning on foods that are just simply unhealthy for them. So it's tweaking that, and also understanding that there are individuals who, DSM-5 and the upcoming version of it is based on checklists. And many people do not fall into those checklists. Some people have some obsession, some traits from OCD, but they're depressed. Someone else has trauma and is anxious. People are human. We don't just fall into these categories, and that's where we need more solutions that bring these parts together. And that's where prescription pad can be limiting, and research has proven this. So I think in addition to all of that, no one is saying don't take your medications, but there are other things you can be doing too. You can be exercising, you could be learning mindfulness and meditation, you can be making sure you have adequate hydration, because guess what? If someone's dehydrated, they can present with a panic attack. Dehydration has been associated with symptoms of depression. So knowing all of this, understanding that time in nature helps uplift your mood, let alone everything else, working on your stress. So it isn't a one size fits all. And this is where we need to be comprehensive in unpacking what's going on with mental health and offering people more solutions than, here goes, take this prescription and leave my office kind of thing and come back in a month. But that's how the medical system is set up, and it's failing us. Certainly it's failing us in mental health.
Yeah, it is. But I also think a lot of it is on the individual as opposed to the medical system. And here's what I mean. I'm approaching 40, and every year that goes by, I'm readily aware of how much more time and resources are required just for healthy maintenance. And it's almost untenable because young kids and in the middle of a pandemic and work and fixing stuff around the house. So I think people often go, look, I know I want to mentally feel better, but changing my diet, especially in the midst of all the noise, is exhausting, difficult, expensive. I'm not a chef. So, if I have to go out in nature and I have to meditate and I have to hydrate and I got to monitor my stress and I got to stretch and I got to work out and it's too much, So sometimes people just say, just give me the pill. Let me live my life. I'll do the best I can. Is there a message you would give people that feel overwhelmed that they can still make progress and not be so worried about it?
Absolutely. So, what you just said, Chris, is overwhelming to any person. And when I said it, what I'm really referring to is some sort of a stepwise plan. I think the trap we've fallen into is an overnight fix. We're a nation of convenience and quick fixes, and we want the pill and we want to feel better. We want everything else to go away. The truth is, life doesn't work that way. And even with medication, it takes a few weeks to act. Sometimes, you can feel an effect in the first week, but very often, someone who's prescribed an SSRI, for example, doesn't feel better immediately. Similarly with nutrition, it's not an overnight fix, but it is a stepwise plan that is based on healthy principles that we somehow have forgotten even before the pandemic. This mental health crisis was still there. Maybe there was less of a focus on it. So it is, the word of encouragement is, it's a stepwise, slow and steady plan, go at your own pace, but realize when you put down that processed food, when you pay attention to the added and refined sugars, when you're starting to cook even the simplest of meals, in my book, This Is Your Brain on Food, chapter 11 was the most difficult chapter for me to write because it's recipes. And as a chef, I kept thinking, I don't want people to have to learn how to make a souffle. I just want them to eat healthy whole foods. Just, cook. So the recipes are super simple, because I actually began cooking later in life. And because I came from that large South Asian family, everyone else cooked. So I was kind of tasting food all the time. So I understand it's not easy to just teach yourself how to cook. And for that reason, I encourage people to try out a recipe or two. Build in a walk with your dog, your family, play outdoors with the kids, walk to buy the newspaper, walk to get that cup of coffee. Build in things that you can almost do naturally as part of your life. And you don't have to do all 10 things at one time. When I ask people to make changes with their nutrition, because I want it to be empowering, I ask them the one habit that they know is bothering them about what they're eating or what they're doing with their food, to start there, because that's powerful. If they've identified it, it's in their awareness, it's in their consciousness, and they are thinking about it. So that's a very powerful place to start, and have that then lead the way to the other things. Yeah. They're simple things. I have some pillars of nutritional psychiatry that I ask people to build in, but these are not rocket science. The good thing, though, is they're based on scientific evidence. So then I'm not just saying eat leafy greens because I'm a doctor and I said so. It's eat leafy greens because there are these multiple nutrients in them, but they contain folate, and low folate is associated with depression. So guess what? If you're eating a healthy bowl of salad every day, lots of colors in it, but based on a bed of leafy greens, that's a good nutrient for you to be adding in every single day. So it's simple things like that, and it's slow and steady. It's the moment someone starts to feel better, they want to do more. And that's when they pick up the pace.
I love that. And we're going to get into all of it. One other question on this idea of effectiveness. Let's say a patient comes to you, right? And they're something's wrong. It doesn't matter the malady, right? But mentally something's wrong. If you had, on a scale of 0 to 100, and you only had the options of food, diet, and medication, how much do you think each one could improve it? What I'm trying to understand is, would you say, look, food can get us 80% of the way there in most cases? Or is it vice versa? Food gets us 20. I'm just trying to understand, based on your background and the research, how effective actually is this?
Sure. I think it's a great question. And I want to share some caveats with you first.
Yes, of course.
Each case is different. The science around the microbiome and microbes and microbiota really shows us that each person's gut microbiome is like a thumbprint. So every person is going to be different, number one. Secondly, it depends on the clinical case. As a clinician, and as a clinical scientist, I have to see how sick someone is, and if they need a medication or even hospitalization or some form of, let's say, higher level of care in mental health. That's a deciding factor right there. Does it mean that they shouldn't be eating healthy meals, that their family can't help them with that? Absolutely not. But first and foremost, treat that acuity of the situation. If we were then just to look at a very simple situation, someone coming in and saying, look, should I take a medication, Dr. Naidu, or can I help you? Can you help me tweak my diet? I think that there's always a role for diet and for nutritional psychiatry, always a role, because a few things, Chris. Research has shown that individuals with a mental health condition diagnosis often have comorbid medical conditions. So important to be eating healthy for that reason as well. Another reason is that side effects of medications, whether they're psychiatric or non-psychiatric medications, have impact on weight, impact on metabolic health. So these are important too. So there's always a role. And I would say that in the individual who is not so acutely ill, say a severe depression, that they can start with dietary changes, that will take them pretty far and actually may solve the problem entirely. So I think that number one, there's always a role for diet, and number two, it depends on the clinical situation. And if someone is not sick enough that they don't need high level of care or hospitalization, they can absolutely start tweaking their diet and go pretty far. And I've had individuals who've not needed to take a medication at all, but been motivated and able to sustain it. I think the very key factor is nutritional changes are going to be sustainable.
Right.
Often with the medication, people after a certain amount of time, and it varies. It could be a month, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. Someone walks in like, Prozac has helped me for, the last 6 years, and suddenly I'm depressed again. It's happened. I'm not picking on
Sure.
Prozac. It could be any one of those medications, or any, any different type of psychiatric medication. But there's a way in which people experience it not being effective.
All right, time for a quick break. And we're going to start it out with a quiz. Do you know what the most important mineral is for our body? That answer is magnesium. Magnesium is critical in over 300 metabolic bodily processes. It has even earned the moniker of master mineral because magnesium does things such as building proteins, strong bones, regulating blood sugar, regulating blood pressure. It plays a component in sleep and many other things. Now, why do I tell you that? According to Harvard, Americans of all ages eat less than the daily recommended amounts of magnesium. Science Daily says that up to 50% of the U.S. population is magnesium deficient. And vitamin D can't be metabolized without sufficient magnesium levels. And unfortunately, if you're deficient, you probably feel it, but you don't know it. Our sponsor this week is Natural Stacks. And Natural Stacks has what I believe to be one of the best magnesium supplements on the market. It's called Magtec Magnesium. There's a couple reasons I like this. First of all, they readily share who the suppliers are for every ingredient they use. They use third-party independent lab testing to guarantee the purity and potency of every product, and they use identity tests to validate each ingredient in every batch. Now, the reason I'm specifically calling out Magtec is because it is the purest, most bioavailable magnesium supplement you can buy because it features the 3 types of magnesium known to have the highest absorption rates. Yes, there are multiple types of magnesium. So if you suffer from poor sleep, nausea, anxiety, or fatigue, try out Magtec, and Smart People Podcast listeners will get 30% off by going to naturalstacks.com/smartpeoplesleep. Yes, that's naturalstacks.com/smartpeoplesleep for 30% off Magtec. naturalstacks.com/smartpeoplesleep. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, that's helpful because, if I think of 30, 40,000 people that are going to hear this, inevitably there's going to be 10, 15, 20,000 dealing with probably a diagnosable mental illness to some extent, right? And you talk about that. I think you say, 40 some odd percent of people could have a diagnosis. And the percentages I'm not worried about. What I'm interested in is, a large percentage of people listening going, yeah, that sounds like me. I'm not struggling to the amount I can't function, but I have considered medication. And right now, maybe they're going, maybe diet can do it. And what you're saying is, yeah, maybe it can. Because we're going to talk about your book, This Is Your Brain on Food. I want to get into some specifics and recommendations and things we can try. So that's why I want to set that up. I want to start with the science behind it. I'm so interested in this. You mentioned the microbiome and all this. Can you just tell us how and why nutrition and what we eat directly impacts the brain and our mental health?
Absolutely. So it starts with the science around the gut-brain connection, which is the first chapter of my books, which I fondly call the gut-brain romance. So, in the last decade and a half to 2 decades, the science of what the microbiome is and the impact of what the microbes in our gut do has come forward. And another thing that is not well known is that the gut and brain are actually connected. They're connected in multiple ways. So even if your listeners have heard this before, the gut and brain actually arise from the exact same cells in the embryonic tissue line and then form these 2 organs in the body. Then these 2 organs are far apart in the body, but they're connected anatomically by the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, which connects these two organs and then acts like a bidirectional superhighway, allowing for chemical messages between these two organs. So in addition to that, it's helpful for people to know that about 90% of the serotonin receptors and serotonin is produced in the gut. So it's not just in the brain. When you think about of any food that you eat, on a day when you're eating a healthier meal, food gets digested. Well, those breakdown products, very simply put, form more positive breakdown products when they're healthier foods. And those healthier products are things like short-chain fatty acids. When you're kind of going through the fast food lane every single day, or you're kind of living on candy with all the added and refined sugars, the bad microbes in the gut thrive. And the breakdown products of the food are more toxic to the body. They're especially toxic in the gut. The gut has a very delicate single cell layer that lines it. Good foods, positive breakdown substances help to reduce inflammation in the gut. Bad foods, more toxic substances tend to pierce and damage that gut. That's what over time leads to conditions like leaky gut, which is intestinal permeability. But here's the thing, there's this feedback loop to the brain. So more toxic products heighten inflammation in the gut. Gut inflammation leads to brain inflammation. Neuroinflammation is being seen in research to be really an underpinning for many mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, even cognitive changes. So I like to say a happy gut is a happy mood, because it sort of explains to people that when you're taking care of your gut health, you're lowering inflammation, you're eating in a healthy way, the microbes are nurtured, they're thriving. What happens is when you're eating poorly, the bad microbes thrive, and then they start to take over the environment of the gut, and that's a setup for inflammation. So it's this ecosystem, it's this system that works together, and our food, from the moment it enters your mouth all the way through the digestive process, interacts with this, and that's why it turns out that we are what we eat, because those breakdown products are very powerful, and what happens to the food is very powerful.
So did I hear you correctly that brain inflammation often plays a role in mental illness?
Yes.
It sounds like there's significant research that can link brain inflammation to overall inflammation, specifically inflammation in the gut, which obviously it makes a lot of sense that inflammation in the gut is caused by the things that go into the gut. I mean, I know it's not that simple, but is that a large portion of it?
That's definitely a sort of a Cliff Notes version of it, because what we eat does impact that gut environment. The gut also, those gut microbes in the gut environment actually fulfills a lot of different functions: sleep, circadian rhythm, immunity, mental health, so many things, hormones and vitamin production, things like that. So it does a lot of stuff, and it's almost a hub for different things that happen. But when you realize that what you eat definitely loops back in some chemical form and impacts inflammation, that's helpful for people to know. It's really helpful to grasp that concept.
As we're talking about this, one thing I keep wondering about is quantity, meaning quantity of food. So we're going to get into some specific recommendations, but take somebody like myself. I think I need to eat 2,500 calories a day or something, to call it that, to just maintain. That's a lot of food. How much of these things do we have to eat for them to have an impact, or how much do we have to eat for them to negatively impact us?
Okay. So with foods that negatively impact you, if that's what you're eating, they're going to just consistently build up by causing more and more inflammation in your body, starting in your gut and, working to other parts of the body. With the healthy foods, I think that the way that I portray and teach and educate around nutritional psychiatry, it's listening to your body, paying attention to body intelligence. So, if you are fending off inflammation and really paying attention to your gut microbes and feeding them with nurturing foods that include things like fiber, which you get from vegetables, fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, legumes, those types of foods, then you are taking care of your gut microbes. when you reduce inflammation, things like your satiety signals start to work better. So you will naturally feel more satiated when you are consuming that healthier diet. You will realize, oh, I'm kind of full. I don't need that second plate of food. I don't need that extra serving of X, Y, or Z. And I think that it becomes important to pay attention to those signals. Just like it becomes important to, if you eat a certain kind of food and you develop a headache or you develop brain fog, it's also important to pay attention to that, because you might actually have an intolerance of that food, or it may be affecting you negatively in some way. All of that becomes important. And I think it's finding that balance for yourself. So you might find that, say you adopted healthier principles of eating, and I'm not saying you're an unhealthy eater.
No, it's totally fine.
You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
say you started doing this, you may find that, in a month or so, 2 to 3 weeks, you're like, well, I'm eating less. I just noticed that I'm full at a certain point. Sometimes that is actually related to our hunger hormones recalibrating, meaning that they almost they lose their cues when we kind of eating the wrong foods, and they don't remind us appropriately when to stop eating. So you're finding,
I've heard that about junk food, like chips and stuff,
exactly,
that it's actually made to miss your those hormones.
Well, they're meant to be hyper palatable, and so we never put them down. We want to eat more and more of them, and research has shown that they are engineered to be that way. So that's a great example, because when you sort of say someone is eats fast food 3 out of 7 days of the week, and they decide, hey, you know what, I'm just going to try to make myself a salad, roast some chicken breasts at home or cauliflower steaks, whatever they might eat, and start to even cook some healthy meals at home. They're naturally over time taking care of that inflammation. They are helping to heal their gut over time and really moving towards their system towards a healthier state. And very often in my patients, I'll find that they will come in and say, I don't have those cravings for a candy bar every night. I'm learning to eat that square of dark chocolate. I'm noticing that my husband wants seconds, but I'm, pretty happy with the plate of food, because they've changed up the constitution of what's on their plate as well. All of that becomes important.
You mentioned something there that I have to ask you. You just said, I noticed I don't have that craving for a candy bar every night. Mm-hmm. It's like you live in my house. So what does that mean for people like myself who I eat pretty healthy? I'll tell you, I'm not great, but healthy. At night, every night after dinner, I instantly get a ridiculous sugar craving. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does that have any meaning?
So, of course, every person is different, right? And it could also be dependent on what you're eating during the day and your own constitution. But, a lot of people either have a habit of, I really need to eat dessert every night. Maybe they grew up eating dessert. Maybe that was their lifestyle, or maybe they always ate ice cream, whatever it is. A lot of people crave something, and it's a habit that they're used to. And part of what I work with people around is, rather than trying to deconstruct this habit, try to replace that with a healthy option. Because as long as you're not kind of eating late into the night, I mean, I do think that eating earlier allows your food to digest, helps you sleep, all of that good stuff. But, say it's a candy bar, say it's ice cream. Finding a healthy version that gives you that little bit of sweet taste that you might like. See, because ultimately, Chris, there's a lot of joy in eating. And I don't want people to be miserable and feel, oh my God, I'm never going to ever be able to eat X, Y, Z again. Why not think differently about it? I have a recipe for ice cream made from bananas. There are 2 ingredients, and you can even make a chocolate flavor. But you know what's going into it. There's no processed junk or tons of sugar in it. And it actually will help you get over that kind of fixer ice cream. You don't have to eat the whole tub. It's all portion control and those healthy principles of eating. Say it's a candy bar. Can you, over time, maybe teach a recipe to make a avocado chocolate mousse that, you can, or even a something that is kind of made with dark chocolate, because you have all of the cacao flavonols from the dark chocolate, which are great for your brain. And almost over time, have you eat little square of dark chocolate. And I've done this with individuals, and when they start to give up that candy bar and almost acquired taste for extra dark natural chocolate, instead of a whole candy bar, they eat a small square, and they will
Hmm.
literally call me up and say, I had that with a piece of fruit, some berries, or a piece of orange, and it was great. I'm not having that craving for a candy bar. Part of it, of course, is related to what we said about foods being ultra processed and what's contained in them, right? Because we
Hmm.
know that sugar works in the same dopamine reward pathways as street drugs like cocaine.
Hmm.
So, when we're going after that candy bar, that cycle in our brain is also that habit circuit is being perpetuated in our brain. So
Okay.
we want to unpack that, and then we want to think about a better solution for it.
How much impact or how much sway do the bugs, the microbiome, the bacteria in our guts have in what we crave? Because I've often wondered, is it true that like what you feed your body breeds the bacteria that like that food and it becomes a cycle? And so if you try to break it, it's sometimes hard because your actual bacteria in your gut is craving the food that they're used to.
So I guess it's, cravings could be interpreted in many different ways, and definitely the gut microbes are closely involved. But I think that one of the things we must realize is that the brain is connected to all of this. And so, for example, things like stress actually precipitates habit circuits in the brain. So we need to make sure we understand the brain is involved in this, and that we have the ability to maybe rethink it in a certain way. What I feel like you're saying, Chris, is that if I'm eating candy bars all the time, or eating junk, I'm eating a fast food meal all the time, the bad microbes are loving it, right? Because they just building up that inflammation, they just breaking through that lining of the gut, they just having a party down there.
Right.
But ultimately, we're not doing well, right? That
Right.
becomes the issue. Initially, won't notice it, but we know that within 24 hours, those microbes respond to the food. So you may not feel it immediately, but down the road, you're going to not be feeling that great. So it's going to
Mm.
show up in some type of symptom that you start to develop. But I think that if we understand that the brain is involved, and that those cravings are related to that as well, but they're also related to the type of food, then we can try to pivot around what it is that we're eating. Because if you're going to continue that cycle of craving, the
Yeah.
craving is going to continue. So unless you
Right.
identify it and then decide, what can I do differently? Can I switch this out? Can I think about it for a second? Then you're really trying to do it differently.
Hey, one last break here. Our sponsor is Golden Poppy Herbal Apothecary. And this one is a perfect fit, especially for what we're talking about today. They are a small, handcrafted, woman-run business dedicated to helping you find natural solutions to your health needs. They handcraft everything themselves in small batches using only organic and natural ingredients. Now, they cover everything from organic herbal tea blends for specific health issues to all natural skin and body care. For this episode, I wanted to focus on something that aligns with what our guest, Uma, is saying, which is the need to get more herbs in our life. And so I want to tell you about one of their most popular products, which is their Time for Bed tea. This tea is packed full of organic, boutique herbs such as skullcap, linden, hawthorn flowers, passion flower, and of course chamomile. Each of these herbs will help support the transition into sleep, and they will help your body stay asleep. The other issue is with things we put on our skin. And so I also want to mention their top-selling skin product, which is Rocky Mountain Recovery Skin Serum. It's a facial moisturizing oil that works for all types. It is antioxidant rich. It helps with fine lines, wrinkles, and ultimately repairs your skin using essential oils and herbs. And look, I'm just going to talk to you straight. This isn't in the script or notes or anything. I sat down with the owner. We're on Zoom. I'm looking into her operation. And I just know that this is a woman who has not only poured her heart and soul into this, but knows all the ins and outs of the herbs and extracts and oils that they use and how it can benefit you. The entire team at Golden Poppy Apothecary is either an herbalist or an aromatherapist. And you can just see their knowledge and their love for the power of plants woven through all of their products. And you can get 20% off your entire purchase by going to goldenpoppyherbs.com/smartpeople. Check it out. Look at their teas, look at their skincare, and use the power of plants to look and feel your best. goldenpoppyherbs.com/smartpeople. 20% off your entire order. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, because I have this belief, I'm not sure if it's grounded in reality, that, cravings often are trying to tell me something. And sometimes it's for things that are good. I will crave healthy food. And oftentimes I think, you know what? My body's pretty smart. I bet it really needs asparagus today or steak. I mean, literally, right?
Absolutely.
But then that logic sometimes goes away. And I'm like, well, if we should eat what we crave, then I would eat a heck of a lot more sugar than I do. So I think it's that balance of that fine line, which is what you've been saying all along. I wanted to move into the kind of prescriptive nature. You have some really great lines, some great, again, prescriptions almost in your book. For example, I think it was blueberries can help with PTSD. So I'd love to learn about those. And I want to start with this. How prescriptive can we actually be? And how does that work? Like, what do you know about how this food helps with this specific mental challenge?
Right. So, it's important for us to understand that nutritional psychiatry is actually not prescriptive, meaning that it's not about 10 milligrams of Prozac versus 10 blueberries, right?
Right.
And I
Okay.
think it's really important for us to understand because we know that the microbiome is so unique for each person, but we also know that a person's response, like I say all the time, every good food is not good for everyone. And that means that, you may respond to someone to a certain food and a family member may not. And I've had that happen in my office. I've had, mother and daughter respond quite oppositely to the same healthy food. So it's not prescriptive, but it offers really strong guidelines based on the evidence that we have around certain foods. A certain condition, there are foods you definitely want to stay away from or limit, cut back on, or be aware that you need to start cutting back on them, and then start to build in those healthy foods, the healthy principles that this is based on. Within that realm, Chris, there's also a good amount of evidence for emerging for different conditions that continue to emerge. A recent study from summer of this year by well-known researchers at Stanford looked at fermented foods helping inflammation. It wasn't what they were searching for in the study, but they found it through, as they analyzed the data, and was very, very impactful because it turns out that, adding in fermented foods to your meals could actually help fend off that inflammation. So there's an easy tip right there for people by including things like kimchi, kombucha, miso. Always watch for the added sugar content. Buy your fermented foods if you're buying them in the supermarket. Buy them in the refrigerated section. But there are ways that you can fend this off. So in certain conditions, yes, I encourage people to eat within portion controls, certain foods, and to build it up in a certain way.
Okay. So let's talk through some of those, because at this point, people are listening and they're going, I get it, but tell me how to fix it. So tell me, let's start here. What's your favorite food remedy? And again, I realize the language is not perfect, but your favorite go-to and why as it comes to mental health and then the food we eat.
So a combination of two things, irrespective of what proteins you're consuming, a plant-rich diet, and a combination of the use of spices. Because the plant-rich diet gives you the fiber and nutrients, polyphenols, antioxidants, the color of the rainbow. It combines several principles of nutritional psychiatry in one. And I'm assuming that people know what healthy fats are, and they're using those, and that they're choosing clean sources of protein, whether it be, fatty salmon with the omega-3s, or a piece of cauliflower, or tofu, whatever it might be. And then what I want them to do is enhance all of this with how they use spices, because one of the hidden gems in our kitchen is our spice cabinet. It is filled with powerful, um, uh, powerful nutrients that we actually can be using for mental well-being. One of my favorites being turmeric with a pinch of black pepper. Black pepper makes it more active and bioavailable to your brain and body. Easy hack, easy to do. Start adding in a quarter teaspoon today, with a pinch of black pepper to a super smoothie or tea. Just kind of start having a little bit of turmeric, because that's an easy thing to do. So those two things cover a lot of principles. And are two easy things to do. And guess what? Whether you're carnivore or vegan, like we talked about at the beginning, you're covered, because I want you to be eating those foods. Maybe the carnivore might struggle a little bit because they don't want to eat the veggies, but hey, what our mother said at the beginning was all true. The vegetables are good for us, so we just need to be including them in, as well as everything else.
Okay. I want to ask you this. I know this will be a difficult one for you to answer, but just go with me on this. If you could only eat 5 foods, what would they be?
That's hard.
For health, I should say. For health.
I would eat, okay, so I love leafy greens. So I love dandelion greens, watercress, the greener the better. I love them. They give me a lot of nutrients. I would do, my other category would be spices. Those are one of my favorites. So all spices that I love, especially the ones with brain healthy kicks. I think the rainbow colors of vegetables are an understatement for many people. They just think that we're talking about the color, but they're extremely powerful in terms of being antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and the plant polyphenols really nurture those gut microbes. So that's another favorite group. Another group that I love is the beans, the beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, rich in fiber. They have short chain omega-3s. They have tons of protein in them. And then for the 5th category, I would probably go with just making sure that a person has some healthy fats. So whether it's, olive oil, avocado, maybe avocado oil, something like that. So I lump it into groups because I take those and then I love to do interesting things with those foods.
What are some foods that you think we don't give enough credit to? So spices are a good one. I'd love to know which spices you recommend outside of turmeric. Are there any vegetables you wish you saw people consuming more of?
Yes.
Because I think it's tough, right? I'm not a chef. I love broccoli. I'll have my asparagus. We have salad all the time, carrots, cucumbers, peppers, onions, but outside of that, I just didn't grow up eating dandelions. Like I just didn't. So what would you, with your background and your chef and your culture, like what would you recommend?
So let's start with those vegetables, right? I mentioned leafy greens and they're powerful, but there's another group of foods. Let's talk about prebiotic foods. Prebiotic fiber, very important for the gut. And people don't realize that things like garlic, leeks, onions, things that many of us eat, put in a soup, put in a stew, especially this time of year, have rich prebiotic fiber. Expand to learning a few new veggies like jicama. Jicama is available at most supermarkets, rich prebiotic fiber. And there are lots of basic foods that, bananas, oats, things that are in our everyday diets that you can add in that have prebiotic fiber. So let's divide it up into that. Then, we want to understand that there's the regular fiber that you can get from lots of different veggies. So some of my favorite veggies are sulforaphane-rich veggies, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, things like that. They're actually low calorie, very filling. So you can actually eat quite a lot of it and you can be quite satiated, but you're not, this is not a weight gaining food because it's not calorie dense, but it's nutrient dense. And so there's a whole lot of sulforaphane rich veggies that you can lean on. We talked about spices. So in addition to turmeric with a pinch of black pepper, some of my other favorites are rosemary, parsley, thyme, capsaicin from chili peppers, saffron. There's a whole, almost every chapter in my book, I go through some of the spices. So those are some sort of ways to expand your repertoire. And here's the thing: if you say you're not a cauliflower fan, get some frozen plain frozen cauliflower and experiment with it. Add in some spices, roast it up in the oven, and make a recipe that could be interesting for yourself. Say you don't eat legumes and it hasn't been something that you've eaten much of growing up. Start to get into some chickpeas. Buy them canned, buy an organic canned chickpea, or if you want to make them from scratch, you can boil them or pressure cook them, and start to include them in an interesting way in your foods. You don't have to be sort of you don't have to be a professional chef to start to really make some changes with healthy habits. You really just want to be thinking about how to enhance or amplify your meals. Can
Okay.
you add in those fermented foods that you can buy? You can buy kimchi at most good supermarkets. So amplify your foods that way, and then choose certain vegetables.
I want to end with a couple of things. If I'm listening and I'm struggling with anxiety right now, right? So tough environment. Maybe it's not clinical. It's just, look, I'm a little on edge and
Yeah.
I've been looking to improve my diet anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd like to compare and contrast. How might you tackle something like anxiety and then next versus something like depression?
Sure. So, with anxiety, there are a couple of things that are not food related that I think are important.
Okay.
One is always be learning techniques like breathing techniques, relaxation techniques, a mindfulness practice, having an app that you can listen to feel better. Because guess what? When you're having those anxious moments, whether it's a diagnosis or whether it's just how you're feeling as a human being in the current times, you can actually pick up your phone and listen to that app. You can use that breathing exercise. You can do a mindfulness technique, because what you want to be doing, Chris, is you want to be practicing these and having them be part of your lifestyle so that when you have an anxious moment, you know what to lean into. Because it is not helpful to say to someone who is anxious, calm down or take a deep breath. It's actually very annoying and can be very off-putting to the person, because their system is in such overdrive that it doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you learn the techniques when you're having less anxious days. But then you look at, the first thing to look at is, what are the foods that you're eating that are driving the anxiety? And a big one here are artificial sweeteners. A lot of people saying, I'm eating too much of candy, I'm eating too much of this, will go to a diet-free soda, or will go to a sugar-free candy or sugar-free version of something. The artificial sweeteners are not good for your gut. A lot of the everyday ones that we know are actually very disruptive, and that drives anxiety. So clean up your diet, and there are a whole, in my book, I go through lists of other foods that you kind of want to start to limit to help your anxiety. This is one area where gluten does show up. So it might be that you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or you've tried everything else, and there are longer lists than what I'm sharing, that, and it's still not working. Well, then I'll have someone give up, gluten. Also, the form of gluten is important. And try over time to see, is that helping? And we only exclude it if that we notice a correlation. But then foods that you can embrace are fiber-rich foods. I always say in anxiety, fiber foods are your friends, because they break down more slowly in the body. They keep your blood sugar on an even keel. They keep you satiated. And all this is related also to the gut and to the brain. Fermented foods are actually excellent for anxiety. So adding in, the kombucha, the miso, all of those. And then, the spices, turmeric with a pinch of black pepper is a good one. Add in some magnesium-rich foods, potassium-rich foods, selenium-rich foods, and herbs like lavender and passion flower have actually been very helpful with things like anxiety. So those are some that you can start to add in.
Fantastic. And how would that differ from depression? And again, of course, there's a lot of steps we can take, but
Right.
From a food perspective, what small tweaks might you make if somebody was presenting with depression as opposed to anxiety?
Absolutely. So one of the things to start removing are those processed meats and cheeses, and that actually contain nitrates, which worsen depression. And things like certain types of high glycemic carbs actually are not great for you. Just where you obtain, so sort of very, very highly refined flours and pastas and things like that. You may want to just start to cut back on those. We talked about the added refined sugars, cleaning those up a little bit. But here's where you want to lean into those prebiotic foods that I mentioned, berries, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, you mentioned that. Also source of rich prebiotic fiber. Add in some fermented foods. We've talked about those. And then add in the healthy fats like olive oil, nuts, nut butters, avocados, omega-3 fats from fatty seafood like wild sockeye salmon, sardines, or you can get plant-based sources from sea vegetables, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. And then you want to pay attention to micronutrients like zinc and foods rich in that, foods rich in folate, foods rich in iron, and herbs like oregano. So, there are ways that you can then, for depression, start to almost amp up your diet, that you have these available to you.
I love it. Well, and like you said, it's hard because we listen and we hear this and we say, wow, it's a lot. But your book, and that's what I want to just end on here, is it encapsulates all of this in an easily digestible, no pun intended, way, right? With recipes, with data, with all types of things. So the book is This Is Your Brain on Food. And it talks about an indispensable guide to the surprising foods that fight essentially, most of the common mental illnesses and just mental challenges that most people are dealing with today. So Uma, I wanted to first say thank you so much. I also wanted to say, for people who are hearing this, like myself, right? And we go, okay, I got the book, I'm digging in. Where do you think we should get started? And what other resources or what other places are you putting things out these days?
Absolutely. So to get started, ask yourself if there's one habit that you picked up during the pandemic that you want to change, and start there, whatever that may be. I'm thinking it may be a food, and tweaking that would be helpful based on what we talked about today. You can find me on social media at DRUMANAIDOO. We're always posting on the current research, updated findings, cool graphics to help you, learn new foods, and really, it's all about making it easy for people and unpacking the information. But we base everything on scientific evidence. So you'll see in my citation, on my graphics that I do on Instagram, you'll find the study that we're quoting or that we are integrating. I also am releasing my first virtual course in nutritional psychiatry to help those who want to dive deeper into the book and go into more topics. A book never covers everything you want to write about, so this is my opportunity to share more. And I also have a website where we, I'd love for people to join me there and interact, because I'm always putting out new blogs, and that's umanaidoomd.com.
Fantastic. Well, I just realized, if I was listening to this and I'm driving in the car, I'd say, oh, what was that again? So listen, I say this every episode, but if you go to smartpeoplepodcast.com, right on the front page when you hear this, you'll see this episode. We will link to Uma's book, website, social, so you don't have to memorize anything, but we link to it there so that you can easily find Uma, find this great book, and learn how to heal our brains through food. So Uma, again, really appreciate you being on the show. Really enjoyed this conversation. And hopefully this is the spark we all need in this new year.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you, Chris.
This week's guest was Uma Naidu. Uma's book, This Is Your Brain on Food, can be found wherever books are sold. The episode was hosted by Chris Stemp and edited by yours truly, John Rojas. You can find more about Smart People Podcast at smartpeoplepodcast.com. If you'd ever like to reach out to the show, you can email us at smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at smartpeoplepod. And if you'd like to support us financially, you can always head over to Patreon at patreon.com/smartpeoplepodcast. We appreciate you being here and taking an hour out of your week to listen to the show. Make sure you stay tuned because we've got a lot of great interviews coming up. And we'll see you all next episode.